بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته, and welcome to فقه المعاملات online course. And we are still in the MURABAHAH contract, and we have covered in the previous sessions the asset of MURABAHAH, and today we'll start with the other component which is also important, which is the price in MURABAHAH. Now, the first point we would like to highlight in the price of MURABAHAH, as you know, MURABAHAH at the end of the day, it is a buyer, it is a sales. So you have the goods or the asset, and you have the price. Goods and asset has been covered previously, and now we are talking about the other component, which is the price. So asset goes to the purchaser, price goes to the sellers. So the price basically and the currency used shall be determined and mutually agree at the time of entering in the contract of MURABAHAH. So price, how much is the amount, the type of currency, US dollars or euro or Malaysian ringgit or Saudi riyal or any other currency, Turkish lira, for example. This mode of payments also, how you are going to pay. Is it cash? It is advance. How much is the advance? Is it 30%, 50%? How about the balance? Is it the guest documents? It is upon delivery, upon readiness. So what's the term? Is it through standby letter of credit? Is it through letter of credit? So what kind of payment? So all these details when it comes to the pricing should be agreed upon when you enter into MURABAHAH contract, in order for the two parties basically to express their consent of this mode payment to avoid any kind of dispute. So you may start doing MURABAHAH, then you think that it is by check, and the other one think that it is cash, and the other one think it's US, and the other one think it's euro, the other one it is think it's 100% advance, the other one think that the 100% defer, the other one thing it's a half, and this kind of dispute, you know, is not welcome when it comes to the Sharia. That's why transparency, disclosure should be done with regard to the pricing to avoid any kind of potential dispute between the two parties. So the price, the amount, the currency, the mode of payments, all the details of payment should be agreed upon and captured clearly in the agreement of MURABAHAH to avoid any kind of potential dispute. And let's say if the financial institutions has an established mode of payments, which is reflecting the banking practice in providing MURABAHAH financing, and also establish a standard contract and standard procedures of payment when it comes to the scheduling and so on and so forth, which is also practiced by the market. It is approved by the regulators such as the central bank. So basically the purchaser has to read, acknowledge and agree on these terms. So which means from a Sharia standpoint it is flexible, they can discuss and agree upon, or there is an established standard procedures of payments and mode of payments which is adopted and approved by the financial institutions, and the customers has to read, understand, acknowledge, and give the sign off on that kind of mode payment. And from Sharia standpoint, they will be regarded as a mutually agreed upon on this pricing of the MURABAHAH. The second point is that the price of MURABAHAH shall be based on a disclosed acquisitions cost and added markup at the time of doing the MURABAHAH. And as you know, when we talk about MURABAHAH is what's called a contract based on trust, based on the disclosure. We call it buyu al-amana, and the decisions of the purchasers is not based on the bargaining skills and based on the how smart he is to get a good price and discount, but it is based on the honesty and the integrity of the sellers, whereby the sellers disclose the acquisition cost of the assets and of course request the profit margin that he wants. Of course, the negotiations normally will not go to the original cost because that's a fact, but it will go to the profit margin. So if it is 3%, 4%, of course the purchasers still have the space to negotiate the profit rate margin, try to get a better profit rate, but at the end of the day, it is still murabaha, meaning that the bargaining still does exist in murabaha, but not on the acquisition cost of the asset, but on the profit margin, because profit margins could be high, could be low, but what is important, it is disclosed. So number one, it is disclosed, but it doesn't mean when it is disclosed you don't have the right to negotiate, but still you have the right to negotiate. And here, of course, it goes, we are talking about the murabaha engineer, but when it comes to banking, normally the rate is predetermined based on products, which is driven by benchmarking, driven by market competitions, and so on and so forth. So you don't see much bargaining, even though officers and managers, they have a certain limit to negotiate some specific rate. You've been distinguished between your regular clients or otherwise, between your individual or otherwise, your corporation or otherwise, how much is the value of the asset. So those criteria could basically be some facts relating how much you can have a discount from the profit margin, respectively, for total price of murabaha. So disclosure is one important fact. So we have the acquisition cost number one plus the profit margin or the markup. Markup still could be negotiated between the different parties, unless financial institutions has predetermined rate based on each products, and basically the customers have to read, acknowledge the offer, and if they like, so they will go for the murabaha financing if they are happy with the profit margins provided by the financial institutions. But what is important, cost is disclosed and profit margin is disclosed before you conclude the murabaha. This is why murabaha is very transparent. Murabaha, the price before you sign the contract is known, the cost is known, profit margin is known, the tenure is known, the amount of the installments schedules is known. So it is disclosed and known end to end. So after that, so you make decision whether you want to get the murabaha financing or not. The other point with regards to the price is that this is of course flexible. It depends how the market go in the determinations of murabaha, because at the end of the day we are saying that murabaha is acquisition cost and markup. So the cost, maybe you want to buy a house, so you know how much your cost. You want to buy a car, then you sell it, you know how much your cost. You want to buy a machine and you sell it again, you know how much is your cost. But when it comes to the profit margin, profit margins, of course, again, if you are talking about the general profit margin in murabaha, so it's up to you how much you want to determine the profit margin. At the end of the day, it's depending on the mutual agreement between you and the customer and the purchaser. That's number one. But when you put the theory into practice, so basically the pricing or the profit margin will be a bit under some kind of control and measurements, referencing on some variables. And the reason we are saying this is that you are not operating alone in the market. So whatever institutions that are in the market, there are many other similar institutions. Even we are talking about telecommunication, providing SIM cards and cell phone, mobile usage. There are many others. So it's not up to you to price, but you have to look at the others, how much they are pricing. So in here we are talking about what's so-called the benchmarking. So meaning that in order to operate in a very efficient way, convincing your clients, getting a big database for your clients. So you have to be mindful about how much profit margin you should determine. Of course, when it comes to the Sharia, Sharia give you the flexibility to put your profit margins, which is driven by mutual consent between you and the customers and the purchaser. But when we look within a market which has other competitors, so you have to be mindful how much you should price. And as a result of that, benchmarking comes in as an indications that help the financial institution to price murabaha. And this goes maybe pricing murabaha is different between a regulated market like Islamic finance, financial institutions, and murabaha in the open market or traditional market. Maybe a traditional market will be a bit flexible, even though there are competitions, but you can have somehow flexibility in it. And if you go to a narrow down specific niche product and services, the flexibility will be more. But when it comes to the regulated market, you are under some of pressure of competition, some what's so-called guideline from the central bank, some benchmarking the way you do the pricing. This is why you will see in the murabaha pricing, all the financial institutions somehow they have a similar what's so-called pricing, and the difference is some basis points, not that much, because the margin is a bit slim. It is strongly governed by the regulator, and it is based on a specific benchmarking that the financial institutions refer to determine the price, to ensure its profitability and competitions and fairness to the customer. As a result of that, markup could be determined either in the form of an absolute amount. Let's say, for example, you buy a house with 100,000, then you want to add an absolute amount of 50 or 50 or 10,000, so 110. So you buy it 100,000, you sell it 110. So you have an absolute amount of 10K. It could be 5, 10, 8, 9, 20. It's up to you. So, but you have to add an absolute amount. You buy a mobile with, let's say, 500 US dollars, then you sell it with 600 US dollars. So you add an absolute amount of 400. So that's one way. The other way, which is mainly a practice in Islamic banking, and again, why Islamic banking, we are a bit specific in some criteria when it comes to the way that the Islamic finance product and services are offered, because you have to keep in mind, I think we have highlighted this at the beginnings of this series in the early sessions, if you remember, that we are operating in a regulated market. And it's a highly regulated industry whereby what's so-called many product and services and many criteria in terms of the asset, in terms of the pricing and so on and so forth, are strongly controlled and monitored by the central bank through specific guidelines. That's why you will see a kind of a similarity is to some extent between the Islamic financial institution in the product and services and pricing, and to some extent similarity as well with the pricing to the conventional banking, because they refer to the same central bank and almost to the same guidelines. That's why you will see a kind of similarity when it comes to the pricing, because of those guidelines and benchmarking used in the market. So again, you can determine that by an absolute amount, and also you can use that by certain of acquisition cost by making a reference to some referencing, and also amount of them. The amount of this referencing, for example, in the context of Malaysia, they use the base lending rate, which is the BLR, and also the base financing rate, SFR, BFR, and also they use the Kuala Lumpur International Offer Rate, which is a CLIBOR, or the London one, which is LIBOR, or they use the cost of the fund, COF. So which means that when it comes to a profit margin, so you have to have a kind of formula. Of course, when it comes again to Murabaha, you don't need a formula, you don't need this kind of benchmarking. You have basically a cost and you just add a profit margin. That's the rules. And this profit margin could be an absolute amount like 10, 20, 30, or a specific rate like 3%, 4%, 5%. Now, if you are in a normal Murabaha, you are not controlled by any kind of benchmarking. So you and the customers, how much the absolute amount you want to add, and watch the rate you want to add. It's up to you based on the agreement. But when you go to a specific market, to telecommunications, you go to car financing, house financing, you go to a banking, you go even to investments and so on and so forth. So normally there are some kind of an average rate that operate and offer in the market in order for you to sustain, in order for you to comply with the guidelines, and for you to satisfy your customers as well. So you have to distinguish between a regulated market and non-regulated market, the flexibility and non-regulated market. But regulated market, normally there are kind of guidelines you have to comply with. There are some what's so-called formula and practice. We call it al-urf al-tijari. But this urf tijari or customary practice is related to banking. So you have to appreciate that, and based on that, you will determine your pricing. So there is flexibility in Sharia in doing that, and at the end of the day, it's up to the market, it's up to the industry, it's up to the buyer and the purchaser. So when it comes to the banking, normally they use the cost of fund or whatever specific rate that has been what's so-called offer on a daily basis by the central bank, and based on that, basically they will determine the profit rate in the market that will be consistent throughout the market. Of course, as I mentioned, there are some basis points that you could have it between the different institutions that offer this kind of product under the Murabaha. We'll stop here, inshallah, and we shall see you in the coming sessions. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.